Thank you very much, Joseph. I'm now going to ask Emma Marcegaglia to address you.
Thank you very much. I try, as entrepreneur, to make some points on what we are discussing, so about European governments, what's going on, about the relationship between austerity and growth, and some words also about legitimacy. On the first thing, I think that in the 3 last years, if we look at the European Union and mostly on the European Monetary Union, we have to say that some important progress have been done in creation a new governance institution. If we think about the European semester, the new Stability, Growth and Pact, the Euro Plus, the sixth path, particularly connected with all the macroeconomic coordination, the definition and launch of the ESM, the fiscal compact, the launch of the banking union process, which now after Mr. Schaubl's speech seems to be faster, the two-pack. I think that all these instruments have created an effective network for protection against phenomenon of instability and also against what we call the moral hazard problems in some states. I think if somebody read very carefully all these instruments and what this instrument implies, I really think there is more protection now against instability and moral hazard. And on this point of moral hazard, I think that if a country is part of the monetary union, now if a government, a national government, has to take some policy, I think this policy decision must comply with such constraints and stringent constraints that it is rather impossible, it's very difficult for a member state to ignore the fiscal consolidation process. So on this point, I think progress has been done and very important progress has been done. The real point is what President Monti said before. There is, when you talk about consolidation and structural reforms, you know that there is a certain gradualism, and these structural reforms and the consequence, the good consequence of fiscal consolidation take time. And another point is that normally, maybe is not true from a political point of view, but is absolutely true on economic point of view, normally it is easier to carry out these structural reforms and policies of fiscal consolidation during period of growth. It's much more difficult to do it in a recession. So I really, because of course I agree on the fact that in the long term fiscal consolidation and structural reforms strengthen the macroeconomic fundamental and also increase the growth potential of a country. So they are good, as President Monti said. We have to do it not because Mrs. Merkel said that, not because the ECB said that, but because we have to do something positive for the future generation. But the problem is that if this is true on the long term, in the short term, fiscal consolidation policy and sometimes also structural reforms, they have a kind of recessive impact on the short term. If we look at for example, what is going on unemployment rate and also on growth rate, and there is also a problem of social politics on this country. So the real problem is not a conflict between fiscal consolidation and growth, because in the long term they go in the same direction. The real problem is the different impact in the long term and in the short term. So if we want to go on with fiscal consolidation and structural reforms, I think in the short term we have to think about something to empower growth and to fight against unemployment in the short term in the weaker countries that are very, badly hit by the recession. And I think we have really to think about something very concrete on this point. I try to give some ideas. First is what President Monti said. It is absolutely needed to lower the spread on interest rate, and some works have been done. But also, it's not enough to lower the interest rate and the spread. The real problem is to make possible that the money that goes from the ECB to the banks can also flows to the business, because what we are seeing now, mainly in the weaker countries, but there are also some signals in the northern countries, is that we are facing a very severe credit crunch, which is a strong problem for going back to growth. So I think that the ECB has to think about something on this point. Some days before, we had the presence of Mario Draghi in Lewis, which is a university in Rome, and he said that the ECB is thinking something concrete on this point, also together with the European Investment Bank. And I really think that we need some concrete decision on this point, which is very important. The second thing is that I think that if we want to stimulate growth in the short term, the better thing to do is to stimulate aggregate demand. And maybe the way of doing this without interfering with the fiscal consolidation going on in the weaker countries is to have some initiative at the European level. Maybe also using European funds. I'm talking also about, for example, funds from the European Investment Bank or other programs which are available at a European level. Maybe we should invest as Europe. I'm thinking about, for example, energy. I'm thinking about energy grid. I'm thinking about transportation. I'm thinking about narrowing the digital divide and concentrating this kind of investment in the weaker country, but having in mind a way also to make the internal market stronger. So this could be a way to not to interfering with the fiscal consolidation, not having more public spending in the weaker countries, but empowering growth in the weaker countries. So this is an idea, but what I want to underline that if we want to go on with fiscal consolidation and structural reforms, which I believe is the real way to have long-term stability and also long-term and strong growth in the long term, we have to do something very quickly in the short term to empower growth in the weaker country. Otherwise, the problem could be very strong. On legitimacy and on what's going on in Eurozone. I think I said before that what we have seen in these 3 years is a strengthening of the European governance against instability, but the way we have done this, the methods we have used have divided and not united Europeans. And I think we have to say this very openly because we have to understand what's going on and also try to find solution at this point. I think that what we are seeing is a kind of mistrust between countries and between governments. What we see is that, for example, the citizens and the governments of creditor countries, we see some impatience with the request made that it's the so-called debtor states, and these debtor states, of course, try to require more solidarity and more support. At the same time, we see a kind of resentment of the so-called debtor countries toward the creditor countries because they are imposing austerity conditions that led to unemployment and recession. And I think we cannot go on with this kind of situation, and we cannot have like a form of neo-colonial relationship between different countries, because this is not the way of going on. So we have to solve this problem. And in my opinion, the intergovernmental model, the model in which the government leads the decision at the European level, has not proved suitable to govern the common currency. If we see what is going on and what happened in these last 3 years, we saw that normally the solution, the decision that have been taken normally late and and they have been insufficient. Somebody described this as too late and too little, the decision taken in this crisis. So, and at the same time, it is understandable that citizens have shown some resistance, as has been said before, in accepting decisions made by intergovernmental bodies. And this kind of decisions sometimes are opaque, as it was said before. And also what we have seen is that in this decision, normally some governments count much more than others, and this is a problem. And I want also to add another point, that normally what we have seen that the definition of the European policy made by national government normally are dictated by national agenda, or I can say by national electoral agenda, and this is another problem. So I think that this problem is there. What I see is also that European Commission during this crisis has seen implementation in its role. Implementation role has been strengthened, but the decisional law has not been strengthened. And also the European Parliament in this crisis, in my opinion, has had a marginal position. So we have to think about this, and some of the solutions that Mr. Weiler said before, I think, are interesting solutions. Last point I would like to underline, and there is also another point. In this moment, I think that a lot of European citizens are asking themselves, or are asking also to their governments, we want to understand better what the European institutions do for us. What do they add? What kind of benefit they bring to the people? And if at the beginning some years ago, it was very easy to answer this question, today is not so easy. So also this point is a point on which we have to think about it. Last point we'd like to do is that, in my opinion, since I believe that, as has been said before, Europe is too big to fail and we have to go on with integration, I think we need to create a political union through a kind of pre-constitutional pact among those countries which share the need for greater integration. Maybe can be not all the countries, but a part of the countries that believes in this, and so those countries has to go on. Of course, being open to other countries that maybe want to reach this position, but we have to go on. And in this more integration, I think we have also to rethink about the role of the European Central Bank, because I think at the end, if we goes on with the political union, the European Central Bank can be a lender of last resort, as it is all over the world. I think if we go on with this political union, we have also to think about the fact that it is not possible to have a European Union being short of resources, budget and power, also to promote anti-cyclical policies at European level. I think that the European budget must not depend on the magnanimity of the member states, and this magnanimity is showing to be less and less, and in recession this is normal, but the European Union must have an autonomous fiscal capacity resulting from its activities on the market. So I really think that we have to find solution at this problem we are talking about, and my opinion is that if there are some countries who want to go on and are ready to go on with a more integration, with a more political integration, we have to go on, make some very strong decision, and not stay in a position in which we don't go on, we don't go back, but the situation is not nice, and so we really have to take decision, and this is the time to do it. Thank you.